The hermit just smiled and returned to his broth as if nothing was out of the norm, and the couple sat frozen in terror whilst all they could hear from outside was the storm. All of a sudden, the lovers felt queasy about what they just had to eat, because although it was tasty, they couldn't ignore that they'd both eaten dead human meat. The man started retching and stood up abruptly. I think I'll go out for some air. He'd have dashed out right then, but this hermit was obviously mad, so he just didn't dare. He opened the door to the fierce storm outside, but was soon feeling even more queer, and he gestured toward the young girl to now follow, but she was still frozen in fear. The hermit looked up from his dead human broth. Are you ill? You look white as a ghost. And the man grabbed the girl and said, yes, I feel ill, so we'll go, but you've been a great host. Oh, you're not going now, said the hermit. At least wait for the storm to subside. We'd better return to our homes, said the girl. If we don't, then they'll think that we've died. Then a long, awkward silence fell onto the room at the girl's badly judged turn of phrase. Now, they won't start to worry about you until you've been gone for at least a few days. The couple decided enough was enough and ran into the cold, stormy night. Then a large fork of lightning flashed down from the sky, giving both of the lovers a fright. But they bravely continued to try and escape through the mud and the hard driving rain, and they peered through the darkness for some recognition of which way it was they first came. They soon realised that their efforts were lost, as all trees in the dark look alike. So they threw caution into the wind and decided to start on a blind, hopeful hike. The hermit had finished the rest of his broth and was thinking how nice his guests were, when it suddenly dawned on him what they were doing, and it flashed through his mind in a blur. This couple were going to sell off his secret, the recipe for his great stew. He had to prevent them from leaving the forest before all the townspeople knew. So he threw down his bowl and he picked up the axe that he used to cut up the dead flesh, and he ran through the door in pursuit of the pair, while their tracks in the mud were still fresh. The couple, meanwhile, stumbled on through the dark in a desperate bid to escape, and they heard the mad hermit approaching behind, and they thought they could make out his shape. As the lightning crashed down, they could see him more clearly, and though they were close to collapse, they continued to fumble through thick undergrowth as the madman was wielding an axe. They trudged on and on, never thinking of tiredness, with only escape on their mind, till the girl tripped and fell on a hidden tree stump, and her lover had left her behind. He turned round in panic to see where she was, and he saw the one sight that he dreaded. As the lightning cracked down, he could make out the hermit stood over his girl, now beheaded. With scarcely a second to scream out in terror, the man tried to save his own neck, as he turned back to run for his life through the woods, though by now he was truly a wreck. He was bloated and sluggish and feeling quite ill due to all of the broth that he'd eaten, but he somehow managed to muster up strength, quite determined that he wouldn't be beaten. As the rain lashed down hard, he continued to run from the hermit, who followed behind. But it seemed like the dense undergrowth was against him as his legs kept becoming entwined. As he struggled through thickets, he slowly made out the faint lights of the town in the distance. And if only he managed to make it to there, he would surely be offered assistance. For the running and the fear and the dead human flesh were too much for the man to contain, and a deep, queasy nausea rose up from his stomach, and he felt like he'd burst with the strain. So the man had to stop, and he vomited half-eaten corpse in a pool on the floor. As the hermit's axe crashed down and severed his head, that was the last thing the man ever saw. The hermit dragged both of the freshly killed bodies back home, where they couldn't be found. And he smiled in his hut with the knowledge that his secret stew would remain safe and sound. As he cleaned out his pot to prepare a new stew with a slight change from what was tradition, he hacked off some chunks of their freshly culled corpses, which made a more tasty addition. It was even more juicy when the meat was not old, and the hermit wept tears of joy. For this broth was the tastiest he'd ever had since he first tried it as a small boy. as the delicate smell of the broth wafted over the forest and into the town. It even caused some folk to stop in the street and to sniff in the air with a frown.
Just where is that most luscious smell coming from? There's no cordon bleu restaurant round here.
But the most eerie part is that smell still appears on the very same night every year. 'Cause on each anniversary of that faithful day when the Hermit changed his recipe, he goes into the town and as some celebration takes fresh bodies home for his tea. So, you'd better beware when you're out near these woods, 'cause the story is relevant still. And tonight is the one night of every year that the Hermit will come out to kill. As I said at the start, some will mock this short tale, but I tell you all this much for free. When you leave here, you better be watching your back, 'cause the Hermit I spoke of was me.